99% of people are weak because they ignore Descartes' truth. I want you to imagine something for a moment. Picture yourself standing in front of a mirror, not just any mirror, but one that reflects not your body, but your mind. What do you see? Is it clear, focused, and sharp, or is it foggy, distracted, and scattered? You see, most of us spend our lives avoiding this metaphorical mirror because we're afraid of what we might find. We're afraid of the truth. And here's the kicker: this truth has been staring humanity in the face for centuries, yet 99% of us choose to look away. The philosopher René Descartes once said, "Cogito, ergo sum, I think, therefore I am." On the surface, it's a simple statement. But let me tell you, this is no ordinary idea. This is the key, the foundation, the very heart of what it means to be strong, to be awake, to be alive. And yet, most of us treat it as just another dusty phrase in a philosophy book. We don't realize that Descartes handed us the blueprint for mental and spiritual strength.
Click subscribe to this channel to get more profound insights.
But why do we ignore it? Why is it that 99% of people live their lives in weakness, confusion, and distraction? It's because we're running from self-awareness, running from responsibility, running from the very act of thinking itself. Thinking, truly thinking, is terrifying. It forces us to confront things we'd rather not see. But here's the truth: until we learn to face our own minds, we will remain weak. Now, I want you to ask yourself, when was the last time you truly sat with your thoughts? Not scrolling through your phone, not letting your mind wander aimlessly, but actually thinking. When was the last time you examined your beliefs, questioned your assumptions, and tried to understand who you really are? If you're like most people, the answer is probably never. And that's the problem. Descartes didn't just say, "I think, therefore I am," for fun. He was pointing to something profound: the idea that our very existence, our very reality, is rooted in the act of thinking. When we ignore this truth, we disconnect from ourselves. We become weak because we lose touch with the only thing we can truly control: our own minds. But let's go deeper. What does it really mean to think? It's not just about solving problems or making decisions. Thinking is about awareness. It's about paying attention to the present moment, to the flow of your thoughts, to the patterns of your mind. It's about questioning everything: your fears, your desires, your identity. Thinking is the act of turning the light inward, of illuminating the dark corners of your consciousness. But here's the catch: most people don't want to illuminate those corners. Why? Because they're afraid of what they'll find. They're afraid of the truth. And let me tell you, the truth isn't always pretty. The truth might reveal that you're not as kind, as confident, or as wise as you thought you were. It might reveal that you've been living a lie, that you've been avoiding your potential, that you've been wasting your time. But here's the thing: facing the truth, no matter how painful, is the only way to grow. It's the only way to become strong. Because when you confront the truth, you gain power, you gain clarity, you gain freedom. Think about it. How much of your life have you spent running from discomfort? How often do you distract yourself with entertainment, with work, with relationships, just to avoid sitting alone with your thoughts? And where has that gotten you? Has it brought you peace? Has it made you strong? Or has it left you feeling empty, restless, and disconnected? The philosopher Søren Kierkegaard once said, "Anxiety is the dizziness of freedom you see. The act of thinking, truly thinking, forces us to confront our freedom. It forces us to realize that we are the authors of our own lives, that we are responsible for our own choices, that we cannot blame anyone or anything for our own unhappiness. And that realization is terrifying. It's no wonder most people avoid it. But here's the secret: once you embrace this freedom, once you stop running from your own mind, you become unstoppable. You become strong, not because you're fearless, but because you're willing to face your fears. You become wise, not because you have all the answers, but because you're willing to ask the hard questions. You become alive, not because you've achieved some perfect state of enlightenment, but because you're willing to engage with the messy, complicated, beautiful process of being human. So let me ask you, are you ready to stop running? Are you ready to face your own mind? Are you ready to think? Now I know what you're thinking. This all sounds great in theory, but how do I actually do it? How do I start thinking in a way that makes me strong? The answer is simple, but not easy. It starts with awareness. The next time you find yourself feeling anxious, bored, or restless, resist the urge to distract yourself. Instead, sit with your discomfort. Observe your thoughts without judgment. Ask yourself, why am I feeling this way? What am I avoiding? What am I afraid of? And then listen. Really listen. You might be surprised by what you discover. You might realize that your anxiety isn't coming from the outside world, but from your own mind. You might realize that your boredom isn't a lack of stimulation, but a lack of purpose. You might realize that your restlessness isn't a problem to be solved, but a sign that you're not living in alignment with your values. This is the power of thinking. It reveals the truth. And the truth, as uncomfortable as it may be, is what sets us free. But here's the thing: thinking is not a one-time event. It's a practice, a discipline, a way of life. It requires effort, commitment, and courage. It requires you to confront your own weakness, your own ignorance, your own limitations. But it also rewards you with strength, wisdom, and clarity. So, let me ask you again, are you ready to think? The journey won't be easy, but I promise you, it will be worth it. Because when you learn to think, truly think, you discover who you really are. You discover your power, your purpose, your truth. And that is the foundation of strength. But remember, this is just the beginning. There is so much more to explore, so much more to understand. In the next part, we'll dive even deeper into the nature of thought, the power of self-awareness, and the path to spiritual strength. The silent battle within why confronting yourself is the ultimate strength. Most people go through life avoiding the one thing they should be facing themselves. It's not the world outside that makes us weak. It's not our circumstances, our failures, or even the mistakes of others. The real challenge is internal. It's the silent battle happening in the depths of your own mind every single day. Here's the truth: your greatest opponent isn't out there. It's not some obstacle, some other person, or some external force. It's the part of you that resists change, avoids discomfort, and clings to old habits. That part of you is clever. It disguises itself as excuses, distractions, and blame. It convinces you that the problem is out there, when really it's in here. Now, why does this matter? Because until you win this internal battle, nothing else will change. You can chase success, relationships, and external validation all you want, but none of it will make you strong. Strength doesn't come from what you gain, it comes from what you overcome, and the hardest thing to overcome is yourself. Let's be honest for a moment. How much of your day is spent trying to avoid discomfort? Whether it's the discomfort of silence, the discomfort of boredom, or the discomfort of facing a task you've been procrastinating on, there's always something pulling at you. And what do? You reach for your phone, you turn on the TV, you distract yourself. But here's the thing, every time you avoid discomfort, you lose a piece of your power. You teach your mind to retreat instead of confront. You become weaker, not because the discomfort is unbearable, but because you've convinced yourself it is. And this is where Descartes' truth comes in again. I think, therefore I am. He wasn't just talking about existence, he was talking about control. The act of thinking is an act of power. It's a decision to engage with reality rather than run from it. When you choose to think, you're choosing to take responsibility. You're choosing to confront what's uncomfortable, what's scary, what's hard. But let's not sugarcoat it, this battle is brutal. It's messy. It's not some peaceful meditation or quiet reflection. It's a fight. It's looking at the parts of yourself you hate and refusing to look away. It's admitting that you're not as disciplined, as focused, or as confident as you want to be. It's wrestling with your own mind until you come out stronger. Here's something most people don't realize: the mind doesn't want to change. It loves routine, comfort, and certainty. It clings to patterns, even if those patterns are destructive. That's why breaking free is so hard. You're not just fighting bad habits, you're fighting the very structure of your brain. Think about all the times you've told yourself, I'll start tomorrow, tomorrow comes, and the same excuses creep back in. Why? Because the mind is wired to resist change. It's not because you're lazy or incapable. It's because your brain's default mode is survival, not growth. And survival doesn't require strength, it just requires staying the same. So how do you win this battle? By refusing to let the mind control you. By taking back the reins and deciding what kind of person you want to be. This isn't about motivation. Motivation is fleeting. Strength comes from discipline. It comes from doing what needs to be done, even when you don't feel like it. Especially when you don't feel like it. Let's break this down practically. The next time you feel resistance, whether it's resistance to getting out of bed, starting a project, or having a difficult conversation, don't negotiate with it. Don't give it time to build a case. Act immediately. The longer you wait, the louder the excuses get. And here's something else to consider: every time you push through resistance, you're rewiring your brain. You're teaching it a new pattern, a new way of operating. You're proving to yourself that you're stronger than your excuses. Over time, this builds momentum. What once felt impossible becomes second nature. But it's not just about action, it's also about awareness. Pay attention to the stories your mind tells you. The mind is a master storyteller, and its favorite genre is self-deception. It'll tell you that you're too tired, too busy, too unprepared. It'll tell you that tomorrow is a better time to start. And if you're not careful, you'll believe it. So, challenge those stories. Ask yourself, is this true, or is this just my mind trying to protect me from discomfort? Most of the time, it's the latter. And once you see through the lie, it loses its power. But let's go even deeper. Why does the mind resist discomfort so much in the first place? Because discomfort threatens the ego. The ego is the part of you that wants to feel safe, important, and in control. It doesn't want to admit weakness. It doesn't want to face failure. It doesn't want to let go of its identity. And this is where the real battle lies, not just in overcoming habits or fears, but in overcoming the ego itself. The ego is the source of most of your suffering. It's the voice in your head that says, I'm not good enough, or I need to prove myself, or what will people think of me? It's the part of you that clings to labels, comparisons, and expectations. But here's the thing, the ego is an illusion. It's not who you really are. It's just a collection of thoughts, beliefs, and stories you've picked up over the years. The more you identify with it, the more power it has over you. But the moment you see it for what it is, it starts to crumble. This is the ultimate act of strength, not just controlling your actions, but controlling your identity. Not just overcoming fear, but overcoming the part of you that creates fear in the first place. So let's bring this back to Descartes. I think, therefore I am. The act of thinking is the act of stepping outside the ego. It's the act of observing your thoughts rather than being controlled by them. It's the act of questioning your identity rather than blindly accepting it. But let's be clear, this isn't a one-time victory. The ego doesn't go down without a fight. It'll keep coming back in different forms with different stories. That's why this battle is ongoing. It's not about reaching some final state of enlightenment. It's about staying in the fight every day for the rest of your life. And that's what makes it so powerful. Because every time you choose to confront yourself, every time you choose to think, you're reclaiming your strength. You're proving to yourself that you're not a slave to your mind. You're proving that you have the power to change, to grow, to become who you were meant to be. You don't need external validation. You don't need anyone else to tell you you're strong. Strength isn't something you get from the outside, it's something you create from within. And the more you create it, the more unstoppable you become. The hidden cost of avoidance, how running from truth drains your power. Avoidance is subtle, isn't it? It creeps in quietly, convincing you that ignoring something uncomfortable is easier than facing it. But here's the devastating truth: avoidance doesn't just delay the inevitable, it steals from you. Every time you turn away from discomfort, you pay a hidden cost. You lose energy, you lose clarity, you lose control. Think about all the little things you avoid daily. That difficult conversation you've been putting off, that goal you've been procrastinating on, even the mirror you refuse to look into because you don't want to confront the person staring back at you. These moments might seem minor, but they add up. They create a pattern. And over time, this pattern shapes your life. Avoidance drains you because it doesn't make problems disappear, it buries them. And buried problems don't stay buried, they grow. They fester in the background, demanding your energy and attention whether you realize it or not. It's like carrying a heavy backpack you can't see. You wonder why you're exhausted, why you feel stuck, why life seems harder than it should be. But the weight isn't coming from the outside. It's coming from all the unresolved truths you've been running from. The irony is, facing what you're avoiding usually takes less energy than avoiding it. The conversation you're dreading, it's not as painful as the weeks of anxiety leading up to it. The habit you're procrastinating on, it's not as exhausting as constantly beating yourself up for not starting. The truth you're scared to confront, it's not as damaging as living in denial. Here's the real cost of avoidance: it teaches you to distrust yourself. Every time you avoid something, you reinforce the belief that you can't handle it. You train your mind to see challenges as threats instead of opportunities. And the more you avoid, the weaker you feel. Not because you are weak, but because you've convinced yourself that you are. The way out of this trap is simple, but not easy. Stop running. Face what you're avoiding, no matter how uncomfortable it feels. Because the moment you do, you'll realize something powerful. The weight you were carrying wasn't real. The strength you thought you lacked was always there. And the truth you were avoiding wasn't your enemy, it was your freedom.